Hello, welcome everybody. Are you all here for the textiles panel? I see zero response, like my first row is here, but they followed me here. Okay. If you're not here for the textiles panel, you are in the wrong spot, but you're stuck now because you're contractually obligated to stay once you enter the room. Okay, we have 4 more minutes, so I will just start talking. So how many of you guys, I see a lot of cosplayers, but how many of you guys who aren't in cosplay also cosplay? Cool, so you all cosplay? Yes. Yes, alright, cool. Cool. It's too early. How many of you guys have already had more than 1 cup of caffeine today?
Yeah. See, I'm enjoying
who hasn't had any coffee, and that's why we're dragging. So here's a very important question I like to ask at every panel. Who was working on their costume until right before con? Yeah. Guess who sewed their costume stripes down this morning?
There's still one I missed. It's fine. It's only one side.
Give yourselves a round of applause if you're still cosplaying on day 3, because like that's a thing. You guys did good. All right. Well, welcome to Understanding Textiles to Improve Your Cosplay, which basically is just a really fancy way of saying.
Yes. I like that. We're gonna do that later.
Fox.
What?
Are you okay?
I'm proposing with fingers.
Which is just a really fancy way of saying how to understand your fabrics when you can't touch them, or if you just want to understand fabrics better. Textiles just basically means fabric. In the historical terms, it means the materials that were used to make fabric. So that's your little history facts with CJ. So like, you know, if they wove it out of grass or whatever, those were all called textiles, but now we just use it to refer to fabrics in general. So, hello, I am ChaoticNeutralCosplay. I am a professional fabricator and textile artist, and that is a lot of words to just say I make costumes for a living. I have 17 years of sewing and alteration experience. I have 9 years of independent commission experience. I am a former cosplay contest judge and professional cosplayer. I used to do this professionally for a living pre-pandemic times when I lived in the Midwest, and I did a lot of stuff in the Midwest and the East Coast. I have won multiple Best in Show competition awards, and I have a wig hoarding problem. Raise your hand if it has been like 0 days since you last bought a wig. Oh, okay, I have a couple people. Okay, that's fair. So one big thing I always want to say is just because I'm a professional, I am not an expert. And anybody who tells you that they are an expert is probably lying, because there is always room for improvement and to learn and to grow. I could spend 20 years working with one type of fabric before I could call myself an expert with that type of fabric. But there are so many different kinds of fabrics, it is impossible to really be an expert in all of them. So what I say here is going to be designed to help improve you guys, your grasp of what fabrics are which, what to use where, that sort of thing. But there is always room to learn, improve, and grow. And I don't know everything, so if you have questions at the end or stuff and I don't know the answer, there's somebody out there you can do a Google search who does know the answer because they are an expert in that specific thing. So we will be covering where to buy fabrics, you know, where do I buy fabrics if I can't touch them. Again, for my friends in the back, if you guys want to move forward, we will have fabrics we're going to be passing through the audience. So if you want to move forward so you can touch them, it's a little easier to do that if we're all kind of clustered towards the front. And then we're also going to talk about how to buy fabrics online, which goes hand in hand with where to buy them, because there are some techniques to buying online, just knowing more what you're looking for and that sort of thing. And then we're going to talk about what textiles were made to be used for what, which sounds really intimidating, but it actually helps if you know what this textile was specifically made to be used for. You can be like, okay, so if it was made to be used for wedding gowns, obviously it's going to be a lot more breezy, and it may not be the best thing to make a vest out of because it's going to be really flimsy and hard to work with. And then we will be touching the fabric examples at the end of the class, right before I grade you.
You forgot the quiz.
That's putting a little much pressure on me. And we will be touching fabrics, so incentive to stay around for the end and touch all of those nice fabrics that I have here in my ducky box. We're going to go over where to buy fabrics. So my preferred place to shop for fabric is Etsy, and a lot of people don't think about going to Etsy for fabrics, but honestly, it has the widest range of fabrics you'll find because it is a worldwide place. These sequins here came from California, and then I don't think anything you're wearing, but I have a jacket that it's a really pretty, it's a red and black camo print, and that came from the Ukraine that I got a couple weeks ago. Oh, and then this also, the pattern for my vest came from the Ukraine. So it's a great place if you can't find something. Sometimes US-based places don't carry everything. Also, if you're like looking for brocades or velvets, a lot of the Indian fabric places that have storefronts on Etsy have beautiful selections of that. So it's great to do that. There's also an option you can shop for just small businesses if you want to support like small businesses. There's options to shop locally. So if you want to support just Washington small businesses or wherever you're from, you can also see like, yeah, the widest variety of textiles fabrics. And you can also see customer reviews and pictures before you're buying. So it's great. And a lot of these places will have multiple pictures that have different lightings. A lot of the stores, especially the international ones, will now have videos of the fabric being moved, so you kind of get an idea of how it drapes and stuff. So I really enjoy that. And then you can always like look and see how long the purchases take to ship and the general review and how everybody feels about the fabric and the stuff they get from there. But you can also find fabrics here. You can find fabrics through Google searches, which nobody thinks of, but you can Google search a fabric. You find an exact fabric that you're looking for from stores with online storefronts, but you want to double check that the storefront is authentic, you know, like anything you buy online. So if you are looking for a specific, like a red fabric, if you can type like a specific fabric like red velvet with hearts on it or something, it'll bring up all the fabrics that exist like that are for sale online. And it's a lot easier to do than maybe trying to bust your brains out going to local stores that may not have what you're looking for. Also, Amazon has started carrying a lot of fabric because they have options now for small businesses to set up storefronts. So a lot of the places that have independent storefronts also have storefronts on Amazon. So sometimes it's easier to search things on Amazon, and then the places, if you want to still support them directly from their store site, you can go to their store site from Amazon and buy there. The plus side to buying on Amazon is in order for the storefronts to set up there, they have to do Prime shipping. So you will get your fabric within 2 to 3 days, whereas if you buy, there's a fabric warehouse in California that I really like to buy from that does silk, and their warehouse takes 2 weeks to ship things, but if I order it through Amazon, it'll come in 2 days, which is kind of nice. So you can do that, and I actually got some holographic vinyl from Amazon the other day, and then it came very nicely. It's from an independent storefront. They had wrapped it all up in like a tube so it wouldn't crinkle. They did a really nice job packing it, and it came very quickly. So you can also check AliExpress, which I know a lot of us think of for like costumes and props, but they do sell fabrics that I keep whacking the edge of the TV with my hat. Not gonna apply.
I mean, we respect TVs.
No. So a lot of fabrics that actually exist in the U.S., like something like 65% of our textiles that we have in the U.S. are actually made in China. So a lot of these warehouses and places that they produce the fabrics will have outlets, kind of like Amazon or even Etsy. They'll have like little storefronts on AliExpress to sell the surplus fabric. So if a place has ordered like 12 yards and they had, you know, they made 3 bolts of it, or they made 12 yards and the store in the US was like, well, we don't like the color, redo it. They will sell that on AliExpress, and you can find it very cheaply. You just want to make sure that you are searching for the specific fabric you want as opposed to just looking for fabric, because otherwise it will bring up just cotton and you won't find anything. Another place to look that I think people don't think of a lot is thrift stores. You can get, like, obviously curtains, old blankets, or sometimes even large cuts of fabric. I have quite a few fabrics that I've gotten that 2 or 3 yards of from a fabric store that's just, it's vintage fabric. They don't have it. It's been sitting in somebody's attic for years, and it's very cool. You made a whole set of ropes.
Pure Muscles curtains.
Yeah, from curtains that we got at the thrift store. It was a big set of 4 curtains. They were massive curtains, and it was a beautiful green linen, and you made a wonderful set of ropes from that. So you can check different thrift stores. A lot of them will have that. and it'll be cheaper than you can find at most fabric stores, because they're like, we don't know how to price this fabric. So you're like, yeah. You can also check Walmart's, most of them have installed this little fabric area, which is pretty cool. I've never thought of Walmart as like a fabric store, but they're trying to, cover everything. So if you can't go to Joann's, Walmart's is a place that you can go and actually touch the fabric. Michael's also have fabric, same sort of thing. You can go there, and actually we found Michael's carries a lot of the same stuff as Joann's, but it's actually in stock. Yeah, we got duck canvas for this vest, and then your ribbons for Vox were also in stock there. We found a bunch of ribbons, and we couldn't find any at Joann's. So that's a great option, because I don't think as many people shop there. And then, of course, you can always check your local fabric stores. So another thing you can Google search is fabric stores in my area, and it will show you all the local stores that are around. Especially if you want to support small businesses, that's a great place to start. Most of them are going to be for quilting, because that's how fabric things kind of started in the US. So they will have a lot of cottons, but also a lot of fabric stores and quilting stores have tried to branch out and include more cosplay fabrics, because as the generations have kind of changed over, we don't really quilt anymore. We do a lot of cosplay and a lot of stuff, so they started carrying more. So it is an option to go by and check and see what they have. But CJ, how do I buy fabrics without touching them? And this has a nice exclamation point on it that's flashy, so you know it's a very important question. Nothing beats running your hands over bolts of fabric. Like, raise your hand if you have to, like, touch it. You enjoy touching fabrics. Okay. You guys also go to Joann's and just be like, my favorite place. Okay, good. It smells nice here. The smell of all the unwashed fabric. But buying online doesn't have to be super stressful, so here are some tips to help. So knowing what fabric you're looking for is a really big tip. So rather than searching for like red fabric, try to be more specific. So like look for red brocade or red spandex or red suiting fabric, as opposed to if you just put in any search bar, if you just put red fabric, it will only bring up quilting cotton. Which is useful for some things, but again, most of us are making costumes, not quilts. So knowing what specific fabric you're looking for will go a long way to help you find all the different options. And then researching the type of fabric before you search can help. So I'm going to go through a bunch of technical terms, so raise your hand if you understand any of them. So knowing what thread counts to look for, or so thread count is basically the more threads that are in a fabric, the sturdier it's going to be. So they make it a little more sturdy, and it's also usually more expensive and then more fancy. So a good example is cotton. Cottons with more thread counts are going to be a little stiffer, a little more sturdy, instead of just like muslin that's not anything. And then know your weight. Weight is essentially how heavy the fabric is, so it's how heavy you want it to be. Different fabric types come in different, usually they measure by ounces, and the heavier they are is usually the thicker they are, and thicker fabric usually equals stiffer. So I've made this mistake a couple times where I bought linen, which is already a pretty stiff fabric, and I bought the ounceage too high, and I was like, I cannot move in these pants once I have made them. So knowing stuff like that, knowing the variety, and you're like, okay, now I know kind of what I want. And then fiber types. Fibers are obviously what the fabric is made out of, the original textiles. And then a lot of fabrics can be made out of all sorts of different fibers. So twill, which is something we'll talk about later, can be made out of like silk, cotton, canvas, blah, 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 all this stuff, and it'll affect what it's made out of, will kind of affect how the fabric feels, how it drapes, how it's going to be to work with. So knowing all of that and what variety the fabric comes in, you're going to be able to search a little more specifically, and the more specifically you can search, the easier it is going to be to find what you want, that you're like, this is perfect. A lot of online shops do samples, which I don't think that we ever think about, because you can't really get samples at Joann's. But so if you are unsure, you can order a sample before you buy. Most Etsy shops will actually have like a little link where you can buy 1 to 10 samples and like put in the number that you want, or copy the link from their other, sales listing and put it in there and be like, send me a sample, and they'll send you these nice little samples. Some of them are little, some of them are bigger, and they'll come on little cards and they'll be labeled and stuff, so you know exactly what you got. And I've done that when I was doing more Don May stuff. I got samples for my Wei Ying
Yeah, just to
and
see how flowy
just to see how, because I wanted something super flowy, but I wanted all these colors because I was getting stuff from like 5 or 6 different places, and I wanted to make sure all the colors were going to work together because he's a very specific shade of blue, and there's a lot of blues that don't go together. So I have a huge, at home I still have a box full of samples that I got.
If the Etsy shop doesn't like have the samples, then they'll get it.
A lot of times, yeah, if you're like, if you message them and go, hey, would you sell me a sample? A lot of them will be like, yeah, sure, because they want to make a sale. So if they can send you a sample and you're like, this is great, they're going to do that. Yeah, a lot of places will send, I'll buy one sample and they'll send like 10 of like, oh, look, here's this pretty thing. And I'm like, this is really pretty. I have no idea what I would do with this, so I won't buy it, but it's really pretty. So that's wonderful. And then look at customer reviews and pictures. So many Etsy stores also include videos of the fabric being draped, which I mentioned before, but that's a really important thing. Sometimes they'll have like a new listing for fabric, so nobody will have pictures of it yet, but if you go through and you see kind of if they have similar fabrics, or you can even check how many of their reviews are positive versus negative. I think it was that red and black stuff, not this stuff, but the red and black camo print I got was a brand new fabric that they had just put up, but they had other camo prints in the same type of fabric, and everybody had reviewed those really positively, and I knew that this was just the same thing in a different color, so I got it, and it was wonderful. It's a very beautiful fabric. So you can do that if you're not sure about the exact listing, just use common sense, like look at the reviews and stuff before you buy. Okay, so what textiles are intended to be used for and why it matters. So why does it matter? Understanding what function different textiles were created for helps you pick the best fabric for each project. So like, you can absolutely use any fabric you want for anything at all. I'm not saying that you can't. You absolutely can. However, there are going to be certain fabrics that were made to do specific things. Like, again, if you get a bridal fabric and you try to make a hat with it, it's not going to work very well.
I was going to say, how was it using this sequin fabric?
Well, the sequin fabric, this is just a mesh with sequins on it. So I actually have to have, especially the coat body itself, because his coat is so structured, I have boning in it, but I also have duck canvas in it to give it more body because it's such a flimsy fabric. So you can do stuff like that if you know that the fabric that I'm getting is really pretty, it's perfect, it's got the sheen I want, but you might need to also think about, this isn't going to make a great coat, I should back it with something that's more sturdy so it'll make a better coat. Alright, let's talk about popular types of fabric. That's me working on cosplay. That's my natural state of things. Okay. Alright, we are going to talk about cottons. So we're going to talk about broadcloth and quilted cottons. You didn't think this through very well, did you? So broadcloth and other quilting cottons are popular choices for cosplayers because of the price tag, because they are very cheap, but they're not really costume fabrics. Quilting cotton is made for quilts. It's originally intended to lay flat on a bed as a back for quilts, so it doesn't really work well when you're doing other things for it. It is thin, lighter colors can be sheer, especially when it's wet, and it's not really intended for heavy use or wear and tear, so if you're going to make a jacket out of it and then go roll around in the mud, it might not stand up to that very well. It doesn't drape figures very well, and it has very little give or stretch. It doesn't flow because it's so light, but it does flow because it's very light, but it doesn't really float. If you think of like the ethereal fabrics that float, cotton is not one of those. It's great for earthy feels or mock-ups for peasant feeling garments. And then we're going to talk about muslin. Muslin is the pattern or mock-up fabric. I know a number of people who prefer to use colored cottons for this, but personally I like muslin because you can actually write on it with a pen or a crayon or something, and you can put your pattern notes directly on the fabric. Muslin is actually traditionally used in cheese making, pattern drafting, or for wrapping babies because it's one of the original fabrics that we created as humankind, so it's kind of versatile all across the board. It's white or natural in color. It drapes pretty okay, and you can get it in various grades that will affect how stiff it is to help visualize mock-ups. You can get stuff that's usually the cheaper it is, the less stiff it is, and then the more expensive it is, the stiffer it'll be. Like when I was mocking up this jacket, I used a stiffer one. And then we're going to talk about canvas. My personal go-to for anything that needs a structure is actually duck canvas. If quilter's cotton is like the summer of cotton, then duck canvas is like the winter. They're like polar opposites. It's stiff, tightly woven. It comes in many colors, and I almost always put it in jackets or collars or anything that needs an interfacing. So yeah, this jacket actually has duck canvas in it. This actually has like a duck canvas in it because both of the fabrics, the sequins and then the velvet I use are both very drapey fabrics that just tend to hang. So I needed some sort of a structure, especially to get the tails for this. So I put duck canvas in it because that's my go-to. I like it a little better than interfacing because sometimes it's a little bit easier to work with a fabric as opposed to an interfacing that you have to like adhere to the fabric or anything, and it's a little bit thicker, so it's great for like if you need to line something that's sheer. So that's my pump for duck canvas. Canvas is used for sails, shoes, tote bags, military vests, backpacks, etc. It has a very structured and outdoorsy kind of feel, or it's great for backing any sort of fabric that has structure on it, that lacks structure on its own. And then we're going to talk about sateen. So I get people requesting sateen a lot when it comes to commissions, especially when they think they want really fancy fabric. And I admit, if you don't know what sateen is, it sounds really fancy, but it's actually bed sheets. So it is primarily used in duvets and bed sheets. It is used in clothing, but it's not really a super fancy fabric like it would sound like because of the name. It's not like a brocade or a silk or even a satin. It's finer than quilter's cotton, so you will get a nicer drape from it. It flows much more nicely, kind of like a ghostly bed sheet, you know. And I have definitely made stuff from it. It's not exactly whippy, but it's not made for scuffing around in the dirt either. So if you're looking for something that you want to weather up, it's not the best option. And then we're going to talk about denim. So I know we think of jeans, but denim can actually come in all colors. There are many types of denim, and some of them can be very, very stiff, and some of them are much more flowy. I personally really, really like using a sports denim for military-esque uniforms, such as my Trunks jacket from Dragon Ball Z, or my Legato from Trigun, or my custom Mando's undersuit. It has the feel of something more structured without like the heavy outdoorsy feeling that you might have, or this might have been a tent feeling that you get from duck canvas. All right, we're going to go into spandex, latex, knits, and vinyls, and pleather. All of these fabrics have names that get tossed around all over, and people either love them or they hate them. So I could do an entire panel about how to work with these fabrics, but I don't really have time today. So we're just going to break them down to the simple what they are, what they're used for, and some very, very basic tips. So spandex is a stretchy fabric mainly used for exercise clothing, sports uniforms, swimwear, gloves, etc. The stretch varies on each type of spandex, as does the sheen, pattern, weight, etc. It should be sewn with a zigzag stitch to maintain the stretch. Spandex is used for all sorts of things, but primarily you're going to want to use it for like a place that you need something to stretch. Skin-tight clothing, gloves, that sort of thing, or as sports uniforms or swimwear. It's usually very lightweight and it can be sheer. It drapes very well, but it has no structure on its own. Latex is actually a natural fabric, which I did not know. So it will decompose and just go back to nothing if left in the environment, which is actually really cool. It's mostly used in leotards, gloves, bodysuits, and specialized clothing. It has give to it, but it can stretch out or warp if it's stretched excessively. It drapes well. It often comes in wild colors with very beautiful sheen. Latex is notoriously hard to work with, mostly because it can be very slippery and it does not forgive pinholes. So if you put a hole in latex fabric, that hole is going to be there for the rest of eternity. Whereas if you put a hole in most other types of fabrics, it will self-close. Unfortunately, latex does not do that, so you want to be very conscientious of where you're putting your holes and stuff. Knits are also used for all things stretchy. T-shirts, workout clothes, undergarments, swimwear, etc. It's very similar in use to spandex, only it's a little less showy and more practical. The finish is a little bit different. Make sure you cut it with the stretch in the right direction on your garment. How many of us have cut it with the wrong direction? There are way too many hands in the air. All right. There are many different types of knits, and various types will have different thicknesses, stretch, durability, and general purposes. And vinyl, or sometimes it's called pleather, fake or vegan leather. It's all really the same thing. There are many, 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 many different types of vinyl, and some of them are super high quality. If you think of like boots or coats that are made out of like vegan leather or vinyl, those are the really high quality ones. And then some of them are like those old nasty plastic tablecloth covers. That is also vinyl. Typically, the higher the price, the better the quality. And also, upholstery vinyl is much better quality than like an outdoorsy vinyl, because the outdoorsy vinyls are just made to cover like motorcycles and things, whereas upholstery stuff is made to, I keep walking into this TV, is made to be like couches and drapes. Vinyl is great for anything that has a leathery look, jackets, hats, pants, etc. It doesn't stretch. Sometimes it has a little bit of give, but it doesn't really stretch. It is waterproof, like latex. It does not forgive holes. It's another one you want to be careful where you're putting your holes. Cheap varieties can and will melt at the temperature of a human body, which means if you make a jacket out of cheap leather, it may melt out under your elbows. And then we are going to go on to brocade and velvet. So brocade is one of my favorite fabrics. It's used for drapery, upholstery, formal wear, jackets, Renaissance clothing, and of course in India it's used for all sorts of beautiful traditional clothing. So the fun thing about brocade is that it is not actually a type of fabric, but it is a type of weave with a pattern in it. So you can find silk brocades, satin brocades, velvet brocades, metallic brocades, cotton, etc. And the price point and look of each one is going to vary very much considering what it's made out of and what type of threads are used in it. Each type of brocade is going to have a little bit of a different feel, but overall brocade feels very elegant. It feels very stately, very refined, very formal. Think like vampire coats or a big Elizabethan dress. Typically it does not have a lot of stretch, although I have seen stretch brocades lately, but traditionally it does not have a lot of stretch and it frays a lot, so you'll want to make sure that you, especially the silk brocades, you'll want to make sure that you seal your edges. Velvet. I'm currently hoarding 20 yards of velvet for no reason, so it's safe for me to say this is my favorite kind of velvet. Of fabric. Velvet is used in all sorts of products, from drapery to clothes to upholstery. Well, we tend to think of like any soft fabric as velvet. There's actually a lot of different kinds of velvet itself. So satin or silk velvet is what we typically think of when you think of velvet, like traditionally. Like this is this here, my lining. I need a help tone. My hat, not that you can see my hat, but the red lining in my coat is a satin velvet, so it's got a nice sheen to it. Silk velvet will also have a nice sheen. It's used for fancy upscale clothing, jewelry display, drapery. It has a soft sheen and an elegant sort of drape to it. It has some give, which can make it really difficult to sew, but it is not stretchy. But we are going to talk about stretch velvet, which is, like it sounds, actually stretchy. It's primarily used in clothing, dresses, leggings, evening wear, that sort of thing. And most, but not all, varieties of stretch velvet will have an even brighter sheen to it than satin or silk velvet. I think the example we're passing around, I don't know where it is, but it doesn't actually have a sheen to it, but most of them will. I did not actually include it on my list here, but I will throw out that velour is also a great option if you're looking for a cheaper fabric that has the same feel as velvet with slightly less sheen. It's primarily used in like babies' clothes because it's a cotton, so it's very, very soft and very, very stretchy, and I really like working with it. We're going to talk about velveteen, which I included this option because it's often mistaken for velvet, but it's actually a separate type of fabric that's manufactured mostly for upholstery. It looks similar to velvet, but it's got more structure and durability. Who's got that one? Who's got the velveteen? Okay, yeah, so you can see it's like a very different feel. It's much coarser, but it's got a lot more durability than like something like I'm wearing right now. It also cleans much easier. So I've seen people who do like beautiful Renaissance gowns and lovely coats out of it, because if you're making a Renaissance gown and you're out in the mud and the dirt all day, you want something that's going to clean really easy. So that's a great option if you want something that's got the feel. It's a little bit cheaper and it's a lot more durable than velvet. Alright, we're going to talk about chiffons and satins. So chiffon is that really, really pretty, usually sheer fabric that just kind of floats. If you think of like an elven dress, kind of that sort of thing. It's primarily used for accessories like scarves or sashes, but you'll see a lot of it on very flowy, elegant gowns like bridal gowns or blouses. There's different types. You can find it in sheer, not sheer, color shifting, and even stuff with like textures woven into it. I have a really pretty one that I did not get a swatch of that has like crinkles woven into it. That's really pretty. Chiffon has a very, very beautiful, elegant feel. It drapes extremely well with elegant folds, and it is the floaty sort of fabric if you're looking for like an ethereal feel. Satin. Satin is a beautiful fabric that has shimmer on one side and is usually, but not always, matte on the other. Used in almost everything from night clothes to bed sheets to ballet shoes to evening and bridal dresses or neckties. It has an elegant but not untouchable sort of feel. Depending on the type of satin, it usually drapes very well and has some give but no stretch. Some of it has a lot of structure and some are just very flow. And it frays like heck, so make sure whatever you're doing, you have that edges sealed, otherwise it will fray out. There are a lot of different types of satin, and I will tell you right now, almost without exception, the cheaper it is, the worse it is. The costume satin from Joann's being a very terrible example to work with. It doesn't have a lot of body, and it frays very easily, and it doesn't have any give, so if you're at Joann's looking for satin, the bridal satins or the upholstery satins are much nicer to work with, or online if you're looking for that as well. That's a general rule of fabrics, just the more expensive it is, the nicer it's going to be to work with. You kind of get what you pay for, but in my experience, that's like doubly true for satin. So do your research. There are some great satins out there. I don't know who has the satin sample right now.
There's like
Okay.
3 or 4 satins.
There's 3 or 4 satin. Okay, you guys all have satin samples, and I've enjoyed actually working with like flannel back satin as well recently. That's one that I started working with. That's very nice. It's also very warm if you happen to live in the PNW where it's often rainy this time of year. It's great. I also love crepe back satin, which is another one that's a little higher quality to work with, and I also enjoy silk satin because that's got a really nice sheen to it. So you can check those out. We're going to talk about wool, twill, and gabardine. So I think that wool is another fabric that just kind of scares people because we think of scratchy sweaters and long, thick socks, and nobody wants their costume to look like a sock. So while wool is used for socks and long woolen undergarments, there are so many different types of wool fabrics, and there's also different types of wool that have different textures and feels because it's another one of those fabrics, that's one of the first things we as mankind made. So it's just been around for so long, we've done so much with it. For example, there are upscale fabrics like cashmere and mohair, and then you have everyday things like tweed and flannel, and even felt or boiled wool, which is great for hats. It is such a versatile fabric because we've created so many types of fashion from it. We think wool as scratchy and thick, but it doesn't have to be. Cashmere and flannel, for example, are typically noted for their softness. Other types of wool can be scratchy. I have a wool tweed and gabardine that are both a little bit too abrasive for me. I'm very sensitive to like what textures I have against my skin, so I like to line them with a really nice satin. There are also many ways to use wool, like Letterman jackets, pirate coats, Jedi capes, Lord of the Rings capes, suits, hats, shirts, etc. It's a very versatile fabric, so just like do a little bit of research on what you're thinking. It's great for like if you're doing school uniforms. A lot of those are made out of different types of wool tweed, that sort of thing. Twill and gabardine. I've included these because people get really confused about them, or at least in the past couple of months I've had people asking me a lot about them. So twill is actually a type of weave that is used to create textiles. Because it's a type of weave, there are many, many, many different types of twills. Herringbone, houndstooth, and flannel are some different types of twill weave. And then Calvary twill, denim, gabardine, and lining twill are made with a different type of twill weave. So all of those fabrics that I just listed can be made with different types of textiles themselves, all using the twill weave. So each of those fabrics can have different types of twill. So that's when you say, I want a twill fabric. You just said, I want to own the world, because there's so many different types of fabric that can be made using a twill weave. So the biggest characteristic of like a twill is that it will have a front side, which is called the technical front, and the back side, which is called the technical back, because we sewers are very creative, that are distinctly different from each other. It's almost always very durable. That is the main note for twill fabrics. It is extremely durable. That is why it's used, as I said, Calvary twill is the name it was used for Calvary jackets and military jackets and stuff. So it is a very sturdy type of fabric. Gabardine. is a variety of twill fabric, but it has many types such as cotton, silk, wool, and mixed fibers. It's used in suits, overcoats like trench coats, work uniforms, and windbreakers. It's noted for its durability, but it's not always its pleasant texture, so this is another one that you're like, sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's a little scratchy. Different weights often have different structures depending on the layers and the tightness of the weave. Specialty fabrics, those ones we can wait to hand out.
Okay.
Yeah. So specialty fabrics, I'm not going to talk about all of these, but basically specialty fabrics are the best, they are the most fun, and they are out there in like every single variety that you could think of. I have pre-quilted velvet, I have sequins on tulle, I have embroidered tulle, I have sequins on satin, I have beaded brocade. If you can picture it in your head, it probably exists out there somewhere and you could find it. A quick Google search, if you know what type of fabric, if you're like, I want a beaded brocade, you can do a Google search and it'll probably help you come up with some different things. Because of their special nature, like they're specialty fabrics, so they're not commonly made this way. Each of these fabrics is going to kind of flow and drape differently. And the more you know about the base fabrics you're purchasing, that's a word, the better idea you'll have about how these specialty fabrics are going to work. So like if you get a satin that's really heavily beaded, you kind of have an idea of how the satin flows, but you know the beads are going to be heavier, so it's going to have more of a drape and more of a weight to it. And of course, if the fabric doesn't really exist, which is almost impossible in the world we live in, you can add the embellishments yourself with beading, embroidery, sequins, and rhinestones. So there's a lot of options there. You guys are amazing. Thank you for coming. And if you have any questions, I will be outside the room in a couple of minutes.
Oh, there you go. Here you go.
So thank you all. Have a great rest of your afternoon and con.